At the beginning of the book of Exodus, Pharaoh was becoming concerned that the growing population of the Hebrew people were going to take over the land of Egypt. No matter how hard he required them to work, they grew stronger and stronger. In Exodus 1, Pharaoh is already at his breaking point, and the Egyptian midwives are given the instructions to kill any Hebrew baby boys that they help bring into the world. These midwives, in their commitment to children, and also, as scripture tells us, in their dedication to God, they give an excuse as to why they can't kill these babies when they are born. They say the Hebrew women are not like the Egyptian women, for they are vigorous and give birth before we can get to them. So in response, Pharaoh commands everyone, not just the midwives, to be on the lookout for Hebrew baby boys. And he instructs that every baby boy that is born to the Hebrews should be thrown into the Nile River. It's unimaginable, but this is the world that Moses is born into. Scripture tells us that his mother, when he was born, noticed that he was a fine baby. That word fine is the same Hebrew word used in Genesis when God looked at creation and declared it good. God created water and light and night and day and animals and humans, and God saw that it was good. His mother, who we come later to know as Jochebed, saw her son Moses, declared him good, and with seemingly no good options, she hid him for 3 months, as long as she could without anyone finding out. After those 3 months, with even fewer options, Jochebed put Moses in a basket, floated him down the river, hoping beyond hope that someone with compassion would find him and save his life. And we know how his story goes. Pharaoh's daughter finds Moses and keeps him as her own son. Moses grows up, and as a young adult, he flees Egypt after killing an abusive Egyptian slave master. In exile, he marries, begins a family, and works tending his father-in-law's sheep. And then on a seemingly otherwise ordinary day, Moses is leading his flock to what scripture calls beyond the wilderness. He's leading them beyond the wilderness, where he treads upon holy ground and meets God in a burning bush. It is on this holy ground that God says to Moses, "I have observed the misery of my people who are in Egypt. I have heard their cry on account of their taskmasters. Indeed, I know their suffering." And God tells Moses to come. I will send you to Pharaoh to bring my people, the Israelites, out of Egypt. And Moses replies back, "Who am I that I should go to Pharaoh and bring the Israelites out of Egypt?" And God says, "I will be with you, and this shall be the sign for you that it is I who sent you. When you have brought the people out of Egypt, you shall worship God on this mountain." As Moses contemplates this exchange with God, and as God gives more specific instructions, telling Moses to assemble the elders of Israel to go to Pharaoh to tell him to let them go free, Moses protests that he is a mere sheep herder, no one that anyone will pay attention to, and certainly he is not eloquent enough to convince an entire people to leave behind everything that is familiar to them. The narrative is long, it's too long to read here, but I would encourage you to read Exodus chapter 3 and 4 especially, sometime this week if you have the opportunity. Because we find in this story a place I imagine we've all been, the place where we say, "God, please send someone else. I'm not worthy or capable or available." Here is a short passage from Exodus 4, verses 1 through 5, as Moses begins to realize what God is asking him to do. Then Moses answered, But suppose they do not believe me or listen to me, but say, 'The Lord did not appear to you.' The Lord said to him, 'What is that in your hand?' He said, 'A staff.' And he said, 'Throw it on the ground.' So he threw the staff on the ground, and it became a snake, and Moses drew back from it. Then the Lord said to Moses, 'Reach out your hand and seize it by the tail.' So he reached out his hand and grasped it, and it became a staff in his hand, so that they may believe that the Lord, the God of their ancestors, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob, has appeared to you." And we know from hearing the rest of the story that God gives Moses other ways to help the people believe him as well. Moses puts his hand in his cloak and it becomes leprous. And then when he places it in the cloak again, it is restored as quickly as it had changed. If the Israelite people would not believe the first two signs, God tells them to take some water from the Nile River and to pour it on the dry ground, and it will become blood on the dry ground. And when Moses is still unsure about his calling, his instructions from God, and still unsure about his ability to speak to the Israelite elders and to Pharaoh, God sends his brother Aaron with him to speak for him. It has been an interesting journey for me these past few months as I have used the questions that we find in Scripture to guide these lessons, to guide these videos. Questions are asked all throughout Scripture, and we often read right past them as just another part of the narrative. As I have been reflecting on the questions in Scripture, I've tried to approach them as an invitation to ask myself and to ask you how we might respond to these questions in our own lives. This week's question is a little trickier to notice than some of the previous week's questions. God asks, "What is that in your hand, Moses?" It was nothing special, a shepherd's staff, a wooden tool of his trade as a shepherd. And this question might seem unimportant. It's simply a means to an end. It's a question that might be easily skipped over. But I think the imagery is significant. God instructed Moses to use a resource he already had in his hand. Moses needs some reassurance, and God essentially said, "Okay, we will find a way to make this work with the skills and resources I've already given you." And that question, what is in your hand? I've been wondering this week as I've thought about the story of Moses and the question God asks, about the things we hold in our hands. Sometimes the things we hold literally, but often the things we hold metaphorically. What are the experiences you hold that spark empathy within you for the challenges others may be going through? What are the resources you hold that could be shared with others? What are the skills you hold that someone else might be interested in learning? What are the words you hold that you may be afraid to give voice to? What is that in your hand? On the flip side, are there things you are carrying that are not so useful to you anymore? Maybe old wounds, insecurities, grudges, stereotypes, messages that tell you that you are not enough, control, worrying about things that you have no control over. What are you holding on to so tightly that you no longer have room for anything else? What are you holding on to so tightly that it prevents you from being able to grasp or hold or experience the love of God or the love of other people? What is that in your hand? I hope you will reflect with me this week about the emotions, the experiences, the gifts, and the interests that you hold in your hands or in your hearts, that God might be calling you to use in a new or surprising way. And I hope you will also take some time to think about the things that you hold that might need to be released, to be let go of. Together, may we find the courage deep within us to listen for God in both the holding and the letting go. Take good care, and peace to you this week. Amen.